Steve, would you have a comment to make about conservation and parks and encouraging people to be part of the conservation, but at the same time improving health and focus?
Yes, I think it's a continuum. I think we've got to recognize that the nature begins right outside our front door, that the ocean begins with the storm drain at the curb of our street, that the natural world and the wilderness begins with the park down the block, or even with the tree box in front of our home. And we can't any longer think of the urban parks realm as something that's completely disconnected from nature. In fact, we'll be having a workshop this afternoon, get a plug in for that at 4 o'clock with this International Urban Parks Alliance that Parks Victoria has been instrumental in. But I think that's absolutely key. You know, Richard talked about how it's really the nearby parks. We've got to reestablish that continuum and get away from the idea that, as Richard said very well, that nature is something other.
Yes. It comes from within, and seeing the photograph of your daughter on the beach, amazing. You can hold it close, but she can hold where she is very close too. So, and I noticed in one of your overheads where you had along the side all of the things from research, from participation, from art, from communication, and very much from presentations. It was a way of engaging people, of inviting them in, but importantly of hearing their stories and being able to share that with others. So Kathleen, would you have a message for the audience around healthy parks, healthy people, healthy oceans, and the connectivity that I think every one of us has mentioned this morning?
Well, just to underscore what everyone has said, we obviously are all working on this great challenge to live in closer harmony with nature and to understand that we can't damage nature or denigrate it without ultimately harming ourselves and our children. And again, I think it was said earlier, this is, Richard, you said it about the high school students. This is an incredible time in the history of the world. And it's like right now, it feels to me. And that's exciting. I think there's huge opportunities. And every year I feel like conferences like this and other gatherings of like-minded people, you know, we're kind of taking over, you know, and the creativity is coming and the collaborations, we're breaking down walls between siloed disciplines of science and art and conservation and social sciences. I was just listening to Ed Wilson on Thursday talk about consilience, which is the unity of knowledge, really breaking down those barriers between humanities and natural sciences. And it's happening, and I think for me that's a way of keeping the optimism and energy, and definitely fueled by partnerships that are being played out in these halls today. So.
Yes. And the partnerships with health and very much the medical profession, but also to give governments a plug, we've got something called Better Access in mental health, which means that, and we've also got a medical benefits schedule, which is a national health system. It's fantastic as a safety net right across Australia. But it means that, and under the medical benefits, the MBS, you can go to a GP and be referred to an exercise physiologist for up to 3 sessions. You can go to a GP and be referred to a psychologist, not a drug prescribing practitioner, but a psychologist for up to 12 and 18 sessions around better health and tackling depression and anxiety. And we've just done a study with all of Australia under our National Health and Medical Research Council on looking at the prescribing of antidepressants. There is only one drug that is safe for young people between 13 and 24. There is no evidence in the world that shows that antidepressants prescribed for children under 13 is either safe or effective. And so there's a great deal that we need to do, but we can do that in partnership with governments. We can certainly do that in partnership with the medical profession. People like Sally and others are leading the way in talking about things, having the conversation, and looking at the environment and how that's contributing to our ill health. And we heard a lot of that with your presentation this morning. Sally, are you seeing a change in people wanting to take action, wanting to engage more in exercise and being outside?
Leonie, there's no question in my small cohort, anecdotal patient sort of contacts, people come in and say, I don't want pills up front. What can I do to change my lifestyle to make it better? We're getting that message across. But I picked up on what Richard said, and I totally agree with him. I'm really worried about the message that the media is giving because of convenience. There's over and over and over again cherry-picking stories, and people take them in as the norm. What we need to do proactively is get our stories out there so they can cherry-pick our stories. And I think that's possibly the whole thing about proactive media engagement, is if all of us start getting the stories out there. Media just want stories that are interesting. So if we can give them really interesting stories about what we're doing, they'll use those, I would presume, Richard.
Richard?
Yeah, I'm a journalist, so I have a built-in allergy to happy news for happy news' sake. But I'm trying to, I'm in therapy for that.
Good.
We have drugs.
But I think what you just said is they have to be interesting stories. I mean, one of the things that really surprised me is, books generally have the shelf life of yogurt. They're not on the shelf very long in the bookstores. And media attention, I mean, I have always believed that, certainly in the United States, nothing is either horrible or good for more than 10 days. And this story has lasted. We're 5 years into it. And lots of stories are still being done. I don't think it's really dropped off about nature deficit disorder, about the disconnect between children and nature. A lot of reporters are really interested. And this is, I think, part of the primal nature of this issue, is that it touches people. Now, 10 years from now, we may run out of people that it touches because they didn't have that experience when they were kids. But for now, that's something to tap into. And I think this issue of children and nature has two values. One is the value of the issue itself, obviously. But the other is the utilitarian value of this as an issue to get people to the table to talk about things in ways they wouldn't, and to get people to the table that usually wouldn't be in the same room together. Once they begin to talk about children and nature, they start thinking very differently about urban development, about new kinds of housing tracts. Clint Eastwood brought together some of the biggest developers, residential developers in California 2 years ago, and asked me to give my sermonette. We spent the day in workshop. These are major developers, and they're looking at this as a possible market. Now, I emphasize to them, let's not just do more sprawl. How about redoing some of the inner city and second and third rung suburbs? More people, more natural habitat, more nearby nature. But they're interested. They wouldn't be at that table without this primal feeling of they don't want to be in the last generation where it's considered normal to go out and build a fort.
Thank you. And on that note, thank you. Thank you, the audience, for staying and listening so intently. But I think from the quiet and from the silence, you were as taken and as captivated by the speakers and their topics, but importantly, of being part of changing the world as we know it from today. Kathleen's point about, very importantly, we all have something within us that we can share. And I know from healthy parks, healthy people, healthy oceans, healthy environment, and sharing that message with the parks is a way that we can demonstrate. But talking about it, having the conversation, as Richard says, in many, many different ways is so important. So that, Tim, we are looking at all of the animals as well, because it's not just about future generations, but it's about the koalas and the kangaroos, but importantly, it's about the whole conservation, the whole ecosystem that we have. And thank you, Stephen. And at 4 o'clock, if people would like this afternoon to hear a little more and continue the conversation, I invite you to do that. Thank you, Parks Victoria, for your vision on the International Congress, Healthy Parks, Healthy People. And thank you very much, and thank you to our speakers. Thank you. Thank you.